Everyone keeps talking about Hocus Pocus as this Disney Halloween classic, but you know what? The only Disney Halloween classic that I recognize is Halloween Town. Anyone? No? Nobody? What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into all of my spoiler-free thoughts on Hocus Pocus 2, the sequel to the 1993 cult classic. A huge thank you to Disney Plus for giving me the chance to watch this early for review. Now, it does hit Disney Plus this weekend, September 30th, so when you see it, let me know down below in the comments what you think of this. And hey, before we get into what works about this movie and well, what doesn't work too well. If it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies and TV. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all. Hit the thumbs up button if you are a fan of Hocus Pocus, guys. And I can't wait to hear which one you like better, the original or the sequel. Now, the movie is rated PG, and it's directed by Fletcher and stars Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, Kathy Najimy, and Whitney Peak. Whitney Peak is a newcomer to this franchise. Her character's name is Becca. She's a part of a new sisterhood, a new covenant. We'll get into that in a little bit, but if you don't know much about the film itself and the story, let's get into that now. Hocus Pocus 2 is all about three young women who accidentally bring back the famous Sanderson Sisters to modern-day Salem, and now they must figure out how to stop the child-hungry witches from wreaking havoc on their world. So in a weird way, it's very similar to the original's plot. There's just a little bit different in a good way, and in other ways, not so great. But you know what? Let's not get off on a pessimistic note, and let's begin with my positives, because there are some really good takeaways about Hocus Pocus 2. And it begins with this, you guys. There's at least a bit more depth to our Sanderson sisters. Now, the movie itself actually opens up in a flashback sequence. It's Salem 1693, I believe, but we get a young Winnie, a young Sarah, a young Mary, and they're all together, and of course, the town is after them. Now, this is where I think the film does a little bit of a better job than the original. See, here we get more depth to our characters and context for why they became the way they were. They're adult versions, of course, and also this movie has a strong theme of sisterhood. And that theme carries throughout the movie, and honestly, it's more than what I could say for the original, because the original doesn't necessarily have an overarching theme, and here, it at least feels like there's more of a purpose. And of course, I gotta talk about the acting from our trio, our Sanderson sisters here. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy. They haven't lost a beat, honestly. Sure, you can tell maybe their inflection is a little bit different compared to the 93 film, but here, I still think they're great together, and this is honestly the best part of the movie is when they're on screen. They're clearly the standouts among this cast, and the movie does seem to find another gear once they're introduced. And of course, all of the jokes land so much better when they're telling them. There are some really funny set pieces, like in Walgreens with all three of these witches. That's probably my favorite scene of the entire movie, but I like them together because they're able to really deliver the humor better than everyone else in this cast. And having the Sanderson sisters in this modern day setting also helps these jokes land a little bit better. And there's also some representation to a small degree that involves the Sanderson sisters and their quest for these children, of course, for the LGBTQ+ community. So there are a lot of elements in this movie that just work a little bit better because of the Sanderson sisters, and they help kind of spur some moments that really did make me laugh. I mean, in the original, I don't remember laughing as much, but I do remember laughing a lot more here with Hocus Pocus 2. And of course, fans of the original movie will connect with a heartwarming third act that involves our trio and some fun that they have throughout the movie. Like I mentioned, it's a spoiler-free review, so I can't tell you why it's heartwarming, but I do think some fans are gonna look at that and think, oh man, I connect to it. I didn't connect to it as much, but I recognize that others will. And if you're like me and you watched the original right before this sequel, you're going to notice a lot of Easter eggs in Hocus Pocus 2 and a lot of callbacks that I do believe plenty of people, plenty of fans will love. You got Billy who comes back, you got the musical number, of course, in Hocus Pocus, the 1993 film, I believe it was I Put a Spell on You, and here it's One Way or Another. So there's some cool elements here that actually make it feel like more of a musical compared to the original movie. And the production itself helps these scenes feel a little bit more magical. Whenever spells are cast, a zombie is on screen, or our witches are flying, it does look better. I know there are some instances here that I noticed the CGI looking a little janky, and maybe the green screen was a little rough, but for the most part, I do think that the set design, the production value definitely aids Hocus Pocus 2 in feeling a little bit more immersive. And then the last positive I have here is a post-credits scene. Now, it's not a positive for me, to be honest, but for fans of this franchise, you might want to stick around for it. Alrighty, y'all, so now it's time to talk about the negatives, what I didn't like about Hocus Pocus 2, and okay, y'all, I'll be honest, while I didn't really dislike the original, I had some fun with it, I didn't love it like others, so Hocus Pocus 2 sort of falls in the same boat. If anything, I have it actually a notch below the 1993 cult classic. And the reason I didn't really love this movie is because, well, the directing by Fletcher and the writing here gets a bit stale by the second act. I was just speaking to one of my buddies and we both agreed that the Walgreens set piece is incredible, but the thing is, that's where it kind of peaked. You know, that's exactly where it was at its best, and it's kind of all downhill from there. The movie just kind of glossed over my eyes, especially in the second half, and don't get me started on that 30-minute stretch at the end, where things just sort of were boring. The third act in the original movie is much better to me, and even though, yes, I did find myself laughing a little bit more here than in the first movie, the jokes themselves also ran a little too long. The jokes here don't land often, and of course, whenever they do find a good thing, like with the Walgreens scene, that even kind of drags a little bit. It's like they're just kind of, you know, using every last drop of that goodwill that they earned with the viewer, but again, I just don't think that this movie is as refined in some areas in the second half compared to the first film, where I do feel like it really got to the finish line in a more efficient way. And the dialogue that's given to our characters here can also get a little too preachy. Now, kids might not feel that way because as an adult, I understand that I'm viewing this PG movie from the perspective of a 29-year-old, and kids are going to watch this and view it from their perspective as a younger person, but there were just some moments, some scenes that I just felt, this isn't natural to me. But outside of the directing and writing, I just really don't think the movie does a good job at giving Becca, played by Whitney Peak, enough character development and time. I think Whitney Peak is a very capable actor, especially in this film. She shows that, but there are so many moments where the movie just decides not to commit to developing her character, and we almost actually forget about her. At least I forgot about this character at the midway point of the film, because the movie itself strays far and away from her and her girlfriends, and it's just really not a great idea. I think the move would have been to focus a little bit more on Whitney Peak and her character of Becca versus just really focusing on the Sanderson sisters and trying to vie for that nostalgia from viewers. And for as much as this movie has that theme of sisterhood, I'm disappointed with the way that they handled this new coven with Becca, Izzy, and Cassie. The supporting characters hardly get any love in this movie, and that's really disappointing because I do think that the film had potential for adding another layer to its story, but the film just never pours into its supporting acts. Let's take Hannah Waddingham, for example. She shows up for 2 minutes of screen time and is excellent, but we never get her again. Would have been kind of cool maybe to get another flashback of her because she just works really well with the younger versions of the Sanderson sisters. But also you have Sam Richardson, another actor who I actually think is really darn good. You might have seen him in Ted Lasso if I'm not mistaken, but this is just another character that is used for cheap jokes that really just never work. Oh, and don't worry, I'm not forgetting about Tony Hale, who was probably given the most unfunny lines in the entire movie, which makes me sad as a fan of his. But again, this movie by the end, like I mentioned earlier, it's just a snooze fest. I really wanted this to end strong, but instead I was left wondering, okay, how much time do we have left? It's probably not a good thing, so I definitely felt the runtime towards the end here. Even though it's not a long movie, it just feels kind of like a slog. So overall, you guys, Hocus Pocus 2 is not better than the original, but it's not worse by a lot. This film I think is going to be a treat for some hardcore fans, but for those who enjoyed the original for the most part, I don't think this film does anything impressive or outstanding enough to really make it a memorable Halloween movie, or let alone a memorable movie in 2022. The film leaves a lot to be desired, honestly, and I can understand why it went to Disney Plus as well, because in the second half, this film has a made-for-TV feel. I was actually surprised by how little they poured into our new leads here and how much focus they put on the Sanderson sisters of just trying to make them funny or give them lines of dialogue that would maybe make the viewer reminiscent of the original. It just felt like they were trying a little too hard in that area, and instead it took the focus away from our new generation of sisters, and that is pretty disappointing. So if I had to even rate Hocus Pocus 2, I'd probably give it a 2.5 out of 5, and if you need to know, of course, I gave a 3 out of 5 to the original. And no, I hope you guys aren't mad at me and no one is putting a spell on me at all. No, I rebuke that. But guys, there you have it. That's my real review of Hocus Pocus 2, a movie that isn't terrible, but it is mainly forgettable. Let me know down below in the comments though what you think when you see Hocus Pocus 2, which again hits Disney Plus this weekend. And guys, go ahead and hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel. We're this close to 10,000 and it's all because of your support on the channel. And guys, hit the big thumbs up button again if you're a fan of Hocus Pocus. Alrighty y'all, well you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and get prepped for next week, which is about to be really busy. Alrighty y'all, again thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.